Tonight's speaker has 25 plus years of software development and management experience. Please welcome the CTO and co-founder of Jethro Data, Boaz Rothman.
Hi. So considering all the answers I just said, I'm not sure I need to do this speech, but everybody knows all the answers. But I think I'm going to say a few new things. So we're going to talk about index-based SQL on Hadoop, which is Jethro Data. But we're also going to speak about different architectures and compare and see the good and bad in each one of them. So, a few words about myself, as I'm not as famous as all the other speakers that were in this room before me. So, I've been developing software for 25 years, and I did a lot of work in the domain of search and databases, including some secret projects that I can't tell you about with the Israeli intelligence. So please don't ask me questions about that. And 5 years ago, I started Jethro Data with the idea of integrating database indexes with modern databases, columnar store databases, to create a combined architecture that will provide performance to big data. Now, this idea is not completely new. And as you soon discover, a lot of the things that we are doing today in the domain of Hadoop and big data that you think we just invented the wheel, were actually invented a long time ago. We are just reinventing the same thing. So I remember 20 years ago taking search engine technologies and integrate them externally with Oracle to get some speed. And it did work pretty good for some specific use cases. But what we try to do in Jethro Data is to build much better integration and to solve the problem on the Hadoop platform. So let's speak a little bit about SQL on Hadoop and what happens there. So this is a very confusing field. You hear a new announcement every week, more or less, with new names. So just to get a little bit things in order, at least here I divided it into 3 different groups. So first we have the frameworks. MapReduce, which was in Hadoop from day one, and some newer frameworks, Tez and Spark, that were the star in the latest Strata conference last week. Those are just frameworks. They don't actually do SQL, but they are used by other tools to execute the SQL queries. And we have a list, distinguished list of members that were actually here with us very long years. We have Greenplum from EMC that tend to be Hope for Hadoop, IBM Big SQL, and Teradata that sell the Ashton as a device on top of Hadoop, and another one we just show up, which is Actian. Those are all databases that exist many years, and they've converted themselves to work on top of Hadoop. And all the new SQL engines, I don't think that we ever seen such a large number of SQL engines created within such a short time. For the last 30 years, nobody ever wrote SQL engine until now. We have Hive, which actually runs on top of MapReduce, and now can run on top of Tez. We have Impala, which has its own execution engine. Presto, Tahoe, Real, and the newcomer that it's not out yet, but it's going to be soon, is Spark SQL. All those engines actually share the same basic design patterns. They have very large amount of differences between them. Some of them are more mature, some of them have more SQL support, some of them have less. Some of them do the execution this way or the other way. But the basic design pattern is similar in all cases. And it is based on 2 major principles: parallel execution and full scan. So before we dive into the details of this, let's try to visualize this graphically. So we choose any one of those tools, any one of those engines. And we have our Hadoop cluster with all those data nodes. And we have the data blocks that resides in those data nodes. One of the interesting things about Hadoop is that the data blocks, are scattered randomly. This is very important detail. But not all tools actually rely on that. Some of them will do different kind of games with the data. But let's assume that they are scattered randomly for this case. On each of those data nodes, you will see a query executor. It can be a query executor for Hive or for Impala or any one of those tools. They have a process here that runs, and when the query comes, you need to execute the query on top of the data that is on the local node. Now, the query comes in from the client through ODBC, JDBC, or whatever connection that you can have, whatever protocol that you have. We chose a simple query for this demonstration, but we will soon see what happens when the query gets a little bit more complicated. So we need to group by according to day, and we need to do some aggregation, and filtering is according to a column called prod, and we're looking for the prod called ABC, whatever that means. So the query is sent randomly to one of the manager processes that runs here on the data nodes. Now again, the manager process and this execution process could be the same process, could be separate. It really depends on the implementation, but the concept is that one of those nodes is going to manage the execution. What the manager does, it distributes the query across all data nodes. Of course, he has to be aware which data nodes are live, which has resources, which doesn't have resources, different levels of resource management. But eventually, the query will go to all the executors. And what those executors need to do, they need to scan their local data. Now, important thing to understand is that each of those executors at this stage is not aware of anything except its own data node. It doesn't know that there is data in other places at this stage. It just needs to take care of its own data, get the query, and the way it does the work is to fully scan all the data blocks that it has here to execute this query. Which means that at every time we send the query, all the data in all the cluster is being scanned. Obviously, there are some optimizations, and we'll discuss that soon, but this is the basic concept. We scan everything. So the data goes to the executors, and each one of them has its own local answer to this query. But you need to remember, this is a local answer. If we summarize all the sales for a certain day here, it's just correct for the data that is here, but it's not correct for the data that is here. So we need to merge the result to get a final result from all the clusters. So the next and final stage is internal communication, where the nodes start speaking between themselves, delivering data, and again, it's done in many ways. In MapReduce, we do shuffling at this stage. Other engines do something different. Some of it, sometimes it's done in memory, sometimes it's done through writing data to disk and reading it back. Many implementations, but the concept is the same. We need to measure the result to get one final answer, send it back to the planner, to the main node, and send the result back to the user. And again, this design pattern is common to all the solutions. And the main thing that we need to remember about the design pattern is the amount of resources and the performance of the query is linear to the size of the data set. If we put 10 billion rows here, the performance is related to the number of rows. If we add another 10 million, then the performance is twice as slow, and as we multiply our resources. This is a very important concept here. So, a little bit more details about this design pattern. We break it into maybe two major important things. Maybe we can break it a little bit differently, but this is more or less the idea. We have parallel processing and data scanning. So, when we want to work with MPP shared nothing, this is the name of the design, the architecture. First what we want to do is to divide the work across as many nodes as possible. The concept is that architecture is scalable. So if we add more nodes, we can divide the work across more nodes. However, this is not such a simple task, because one of the important concepts is that work needs to be divided evenly across those nodes. For example, if in our query, 90% of the relevant data to the query will be in one node, that the rest of the 10% will be divided across other 100 nodes, then the query will be very slow because all the work will be done in one place. So dividing the data evenly and executing the query in a way where all the nodes do more or less the same work is not a simple task. As I mentioned before, the solution that Hadoop, it is the default solution that Hadoop provides for this problem, is to randomly distribute the data across the nodes. And this helps to solve this problem, but it creates different problems in different scenarios. Another important thing about parallel processing is that you want to minimize the inter-node communication. Inter-node communication, the last stage that we saw in the previous query, is a very expensive stage. It really depends on how much information you need to pass between the nodes, but it's a very expensive stage and we want to avoid it as much as possible. So this is what relates to parallel processing. And the other part that's important here is that we do full data scanning. So as we saw before, when we issue the query, each node needs to scan the entire data set that resides on its node. This is a massive work and very expensive. And one of the principles that try to make it a little bit lighter is the concept of data locality. As we mentioned before, we are trying to scan in each node the local data, the data that resides on the local disk. And the concept is saying that you want to have the computation, and the storage very close to each other to minimize the cost of this I/O work and minimize the cost of this processing. However, we still need to read a lot of data, so there are many techniques that were invented throughout the years. And again, this is not something new. It was not invented yesterday. It was invented maybe 20 years ago, even more. I remember handling partitioning in Oracle. I don't want to say how long ago, but it was a long time ago. So there are basically several techniques for that. One of them, which is a little bit more modern, is column store. The idea of column store is that instead of keeping the data in rows, we keep it in columns. Each column is kept in a separate physical file. So if we do a query and we need to check just 2 columns, and we have actually, in table, we have 100 columns, if we can just look at the data, physical data of those 2 columns, we're saving a lot of work. So column store is a very powerful concept, especially for analytic workloads. It's not so good for transactional workloads, but this is not the use case that we are dealing with here. And I think most of the modern SQL engines are using this concept. Either they do real column store or row groups, which is simulation of column store. Another thing that is important is partitioning. We want to partition data by a specific key. And this is becoming a choice usually of the data scientist or whoever manages the cluster. And we break the data logically and physically according to a certain key. And then if the query will filter according to this key, we will be able to skip many partitions that we know in advance are not related to this key. So a normal example would be that we break the data according to a date, for example, by day. And then if the query says I want the data from last week, I can prune all the irrelevant partitions and go only to the partition of the last week. And this is very powerful and it actually reduces a lot of workload. The only problem is that we can only do it on one direction. We can only choose one column that we can partition by. We can do some sub-partition, but the main partition will be on a specific column. So if my query will not be according to date, but according to, I don't know, product name, partitioning according to date will not help me. So this is a choice we have to make when we are designing our data, we design our database. And like any choice, it has its own trade-offs. One more important trick that is commonly used is block statistics. Usually, the data is broken into smaller blocks, and we have a simple statistic on each block saying, let's say, what is the mean value and the max value in this block for this specific column. So if we're scanning a column, we know that the mean value is 100, as the max value is 200, and the value that we are looking for, the filter that we are looking for is 300, we know we don't need to scan that, because it's not going to be within the range. And again, this is very powerful and helpful optimization, but it works only in specific scenario. If the data is sorted according to this statistic check column, then it will work, because we'll have a block with 1 to 100, and then 101 to 200, etc. But if the data is not sorted according to that, then all of those columns will have most of the values so we won't be able to skip too much. So there are a lot of design considerations when we are choosing how to partition, how to order our data. And the important thing is that they will help us with a specific set of queries, but they will not help us at all if we don't know exactly what the query is, or if the filtering is more complicated than we planned. Any questions so far? Okay.
So if you have to say you made some decision based on the partitioning based on the requirement, and then 6 months down the line you realize that the requirement changed and now you have to repartition it. Is there tools or those things are available that can help that?
Okay, so the question is, if you made a decision according to a certain set of queries and you partition the data according to it, and then after several months you understand that the requirements are different, how do you handle it? Can you repartition? So the answer is, it's a problem. So yes, you can repartition your data, but if you repartition it according to the new requirement, it will not work anymore for the old requirements. So it's complicated. So sometimes what you do is it's not the best way to do it, but sometimes what you do is you duplicate your data. But this is also very expensive because you duplicate your storage, you duplicate your cluster. It's a difficult problem, and it's not a new problem. And as you see when I continue, that there is some solution for the problem, but not in this architecture. Any more questions? Yes, please.
I have two questions. One, you say partition by specific key. You repeat some number of times that if this column, whatever, why it should be one column? I understand that could be multiple key, could include multiple columns. Why not? It's first question.
Okay, let me answer the first question. You can't really partition according to more than one column. You can do sub-partitioning. But if you imagine a partition is a logical thing, but it represents a physical entity. And the physical entity, even if you are a column store database, you still need to maintain a relation between the values in each column. So if you partition according to column 1, you need to hold next to it column 2 and column 3 and column 4 in exactly the same order. Because if you found a value, let's say in row 5 in column 1, you'll need to go to column 2 and column 3 and column 4 to get the same value, so you go to the same position. So you cannot partition according to many ways, because partition according to more than one set of values means duplication of the data.
I understand, of course, only one set, but I mean that in that one set, in one, it is like a sequence of columns. Could be, for example, date, whatever, some date and name. And you
Right.
partition by date and name. For example, date with specific date and names from A to C. And the
Yes.
same date, D to and whatever. After that, some partition next date and again A to C or whatever, B to D.
So yes,
why not?
you can do sub-partitioning.
It is you call it
You
sub-partition.
can do sub-partitioning, exactly. But the value of sub-partitioning is limited. Why it's limited? Because there is still one major partition that chooses what you want to put there. So if you, for example, there are some natural sub-partitions. Let's say if you partition by months, and then within the month you partition by day. So this is quite natural sub-partitioning, but actually you could partition by day and that's it. But if you partition by month, and then your sub-partition will be by name of the product, there is not big value here, because you cannot do partition pruning, because you still have the same product repeating in each of those major partitions.
Yes.
So yes, you can gain something from sub-partitioning. I'm not saying it doesn't have any value. You can still maybe skip some values, but in the end of the day, your partitions get smaller and smaller, and the value that you get from this is much limited, because then the smaller partition will be scattered across all the data, so eventually you have to read everything. You won't get too much. Or you get some partitions that are so small that your data model will start suffering from handling very small files. So there are trade-offs also in storage for this.
Okay, I have more, but let's talk about this later. The other question on the previous, I think, slide, whatever, and what you said that, performance time that you need to spend depends on size of data set. But doesn't it depend on amount of data on this specific node? the same data set in 2 nodes or the same data set in 200 nodes? One performance in the second case, if it is distributed relatively evenly, not exactly, but not everything in one, almost everything in one. Won't in second case performance be much better with the same data set size?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Do you mean that we use the same, we duplicate the data set to different nodes?
No, I don't mean duplication. We distribute it. We distribute it.
Ah, okay. If of course, if you will expand your cluster, you will have more node, performance will be faster. But for a specific cluster of size X, the performance depends on the size of the dataset. So now, as I mentioned before, it's not just performance, it's performance and resources required. So yes, you can get faster queries by increasing the size of the cluster. So, but you eventually have to pay the price. Either multiply your resources or get twice as slow queries. It's always this trade-off.
Okay, thank you.
Any more? Okay. So I want to explore now a more complicated scenario. In the previous scenario, we've seen simple aggregation, and the amount of inter-node communication was very limited. But let's take a little bit more complicated query. I hope most of you are familiar with SQL syntax. What I'm trying to achieve here is to group everything according to day, but I want to know how many distinct items are in between each group. So I will start with this MPP model. I will start the query at the first stage here, and I will do this part. But I can't just keep the days and the count of distinct items here, because I have distinct item X here, and I counted it, but I also have distinct item X here, and I counted it also. So if the amount of count here is 1 and the amount of count here is 1, the total cannot be 2. It's the same item. So the only way I will merge the results from this query is that I need to collect the days and the values of all the distinct items next to the day, either using hashing or many other techniques. And the amount of information that I need to gather in each of those nodes can be very big. If I have large number of groups and I have large number of distinct items for each group, the total result set for each of those nodes that I need to transfer between those nodes can be amounting to millions or hundreds of millions. I've seen cases where each of those nodes generate a result set the size of billions. Now I need to start transferring this information to the other nodes and exchange information in order to measure the result. Usually how it's done is by bucketing. I'm saying, okay, the nodes here are actually the same node in second stage, and I'm saying, okay, I'm going to handle all those nodes that the hash key is equal 1, and here I use hash key 2 and 3 and 4, and I'm starting to exchange this information. And if the result that I need to exchange is very big, this is very difficult problem, and this is where the architecture get complicated and things take very long time. Now again, I'm not saying this is good or bad. This is this architecture has huge value, and obviously if so many vendors are using it, it makes sense to use it. But it has its downsides and it has limitations. We need to be aware of that part as well. So any questions so far? Okay.
Is it the communication between query planner and executor, or it's all the executor?
I'm sorry, can you say again?
We have a second level, right? First level is the client, and the request goes to the second level. That's at least that's a manager, query planner, and from there it goes to all the nodes, query executor, and the communication happens to the executor, all the executor, or the query manager and the executor?
Between executor. Usually what happens if your implementation is smart is that the planner will be aware in advance that this is what you need to do, and he will build the plan. So there is a first stage, and then there is an exchange phase, and then after the exchange phase, the data need to move here. So all the nodes already know what they are supposed to do in advance. Sometimes there are some dynamic optimizations, but it's really difficult to achieve. And you need to rely on your planner to do a good job. Sometimes the planner will not be aware that the amount of results is big or small, and then you are in a real problem. The planner, building a planner or query optimizer is a bit of an art. I know that because we are doing that ourselves. I hear a lot of people complaining about the optimizer of the planner, of this database or another, they're doing this and that, it doesn't understand. It's difficult. It's really difficult. You don't have always all the information. You need to guess, and sometimes you guess wrong.
So is there any final aggregation happens in the query planner manager? Because from all the executor we get output. And
But-
there will be a final aggregation on.
Usually planner is a different entity. It's planning is something that is done very quickly, and most of the work is done on executor. There is, it depends on the query, there could be a single node that done the merging of all the results. That can happen. It depends if there is a blocking operation or there is no blocking operation. But the planner is a different entity.
So query executor takes care of final aggregation.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. So we've seen the share nothing MPP. Now let's check the alternative. So indexes have been around for a long time. Indexes for big data exist only in JetRedata. And there is a reason for that, and I will explain that shortly. But let's see the advantages of indexes. And I think it's quite clear from this picture. You can send the same query to an MPP full scan brute force solution, and it will have to scan the entire data. Optimize or not optimize, you still have to scan large percent of the data. But with index, we only need to fetch the values and the rows that are relevant for the query. So if my query need to fetch 1,000 rows out of billion, with indexes, I will only go and fetch 1,000 rows. I will only process 1,000 rows. And obviously, the query will perform much faster, and the amount of resources that I need to use are going to be much smaller. Let's see how it's done in practice. And here I'm going to go a little bit into the JetRedata technology. So again, we have the Hadoop cluster with the data nodes. And in JetRedata, there is no need, it's not necessary, to do the query execution in the data nodes. We don't need data locality. Because we have indexes, because we know exactly where to fetch, and because the information that we need to fetch can be scattered across many places and maybe not exist in several nodes, we separate the query layer, the processing layer, from the storage layer. So the query comes in, sent to one of those query nodes, and the query nodes access the storage and gets information from the indexes. Now, the way the indexes in JetRedata are built, in order to get an index for a certain value or for a certain group of value, we only need to fetch a limited amount of I/O related only to this value. This is very different from, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the concept of B-tree indexes. Anybody who used B-tree indexes?
Yes.
Yes? So,
Who doesn't?
yeah, maybe not everybody knows that they're using them, but you know. And when you use B-tree indexes, if the index is not completely in memory, it will not work, because you need a lot of access to the disk to get the information because of the structure. Of course, this doesn't work good for big data, so the index structure in JetRedata is completely different. And one of the important things is that if I need an index for a specific value, I do an O1 operation, get a single value from the place where it is, and get it up to my query node. So for example, let's say that in this example, I had to fetch 2 indexes. It's not exactly matching the query node. Never mind. So the indexes go up. And then the indexes actually provide me a list of raw IDs that point to the location of the values that I need from the column. So in this case, I needed 2 columns, day and sales. And I executed the where clause, and I got a list of raw IDs that are matching this filtering. And now all I need to do is to go to the day and sales columns and get the relevant values. So obviously I'm doing significantly less work here and using significantly less resources.
Is the index on the data nodes?
Everything is on the data nodes. All the data, all the data model is stored in HDFS. What you see here, the separate nodes are just doing computation, are just doing processing. They don't store any information, they are stateless. So, the main difference that we are seeing here is that performance and resources in this index model is not based on the size of the data set, it's based on the size of the results. And this is a significant difference. I can have a data set size of 1 billion. Let's say I've loaded months of data. And then I do a query and I need to take out of it, I don't know, 1 million rows. And the query will take X time and X resources. Now I loaded another billion for a different month. It doesn't affect the query. It doesn't matter if you loaded 10 months. As long as the data that you need to, the results doesn't change, the amount of work you need to do doesn't change. And of course, this fits to a certain use case, and it works very well for certain use case. We'll discuss the use case soon. But I think it's very important to understand the significant difference between using indexes and using the full-scale concept. Yes, please.
Can you talk more about the raw ID? Like, where is it? In HDFS, is there a raw ID?
Okay. So, when you issue a query and it goes to the JETRO index, the index gets the relevant values. It do the operation, let's say the AND or OR operation, and it ends up with a list of raw IDs. Now, raw IDs are an indicator that is internal to JETRO data model, okay, to the JETRO data columns. JETRO data keeps the information in HDFS files, but it also has metadata information that tells him where to find each of those values according to the raw ID. So imagine you have a big column file with all the values, it's compressed, but the compression method enables you to know very easily where to find each of those values, because we use fixed size compression. So if I know that I need to get raw ID number 10, I know exactly physically in the file where the value is found. And I can do the read operation only for this value. Now, obviously, things can get complicated because maybe I have a long list of raw IDs, and in some cases, maybe I don't want to do skip operation. I don't want to do seek operation. Sorry, I want to do sequential read because I have list of sequential raw IDs. So obviously, the system knows how to handle it, and we are doing actually a sequential skip scan. So we scan the column, but we know how to skip the non-relevant parts. This more or less answer the question?
Yes. What's like the ratio between the data and the index? Like, is the index big compared to the data? Is it very small?
Okay. So in terms of storage size, JETRO data keeps indexes and also a columnar copy of the data, because we want to do a lot of optimization that depends on that. And usually it doesn't cost more than 30% of the original data. The reason it's only 30% is because we do very aggressive compression both on the indexes and on the columnar copy of the data. Yes, please?
First, by the way, how I understood that last question, 30% of original data, but of compressed. If to say about from compressed columnar data and indices, what percent of columnar data indices in the size are? Just additional to that question. And
Yes.
like a different
So
question.
this really depends on how well is how good is the compression.
But if both of them raw data, no, I mean data itself in columnar storage and indices compressed well, no, the same level of compression, what percentage of data itself is index data?
It's really hard to say because it depends what kind of compression you're using on the raw data. So, and the compression also depends on the type of the data. So, if you know high cardinality data, you really not compress so well compared to low cardinality. So there are many factors here. So I can compare it to the raw data because here I have very clear numbers. Compared to compressed data, it's a bit more difficult because compression can take you down to 50% of your original. Sometimes it can take you down to 30%, and sometimes it doesn't take you down at all because there are problems. But also in some scenarios, JETRO data will compress you down to 10%. It really depends on the data.
Now let's go to my question that I wanted to ask. For example, in this case, like in this example, how data is partitioned and how it is indexed by which column? What is key for?
So excellent question. I think somebody answered it in the first page. We column every index. Yeah, I'm sorry, we index every column. You didn't catch me there. So we column every index too, but we actually index every column. The reason we can re-index every column is because we can. That's the reason. Because we created indexing mechanism that can do indexing so quickly on big data that the cost for indexing every column becomes very cheap. And the value to have index for a column is that you don't need to anticipate in advance what is going to be the query. You don't need to say, okay, I'm going to partition according to that, and this query is going to be fast, but the other query is going to be slow. I have index for everything, so send me whatever you want, I will handle it. That's the idea.
Thank you.
What happens with the original data after you index it? For example, the original data is being modified. How are you propagating these changes to the index?
So the question is, what happens to the original data after you index it? So basically what happens to the original data is not we don't consider it our responsibility, let's say. This is an application issue. So the application sends me the data, and actually the application can decide also which data they want to send. Not all the data necessarily need to go to Jet2Data. Some things you're not going to do interactive SQL on them. Some things are not interesting to create indexes. We see it as a side-by-side concept. We have your original data where you do your hives and map reducers and whatever, and you have the index data that can be a subset of the data. Now, the synchronization between your data and Jet2Data is an application issue, and the reason we keep it as an application issue is because it's really difficult to build a generic framework that handles all the use cases that can happen. Regarding updates, in the domain that we live in, updates are not very common. It happens, but it's not very common. Usually most data is data that's been appended. It's streams of event or data that comes daily or hourly. We don't support update at this minute, but we will support update soon, using indexes also. But it's not very common. It's not something that usually requested. So if your data change, for example, if you loaded today's data, and you realize that you forgot to load something or you did something wrong, the usual way to handle it is by replacing your partition. You can do it partitioning according to timeline, according to date, drop the last partition, load it again, the new data. This is how it's handled.
So
Yes,
in classic Hadoop environment, the query engine is, the Jethro query node is actually sitting between the name nodes and the data nodes? Or
I wouldn't say between. It's not.
Could you go to the slide that shows what it looks like?
Okay, so we can skip a little bit forward.
Which one is on? It's not your order.
Okay. So just to answer about the question about between or not between, it's not between. It's another node in the cluster.
so it's another data node that's sitting up there that holds the index for the data that's sitting in that cluster.
No, it's a separate node.
Okay.
It's not a data node. It's a separate node. It has a Hadoop HDFS client on it.
Okay.
It doesn't hold any data at all.
Mhm.
Of course, there is some caching there, but it doesn't hold any data. All the data resides on the data node in HDFS. So it's a separate node. It knows how to connect to HDFS, but it's not part of the HDFS cluster, let's say. It's part of the total cluster, but not part of the HDFS cluster.
And that's what forms the query planner or the executor
Yes.
that you were referring to earlier. Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Yes, please?
How do you manage a single point of failure in the Jethro query node?
Okay. The question is, how do we manage single point of failure in the query node? And the answer is very simple. We can have multiple query nodes. Each of those query nodes, and again I'm skipping here a little bit forward, but that's okay. Each of those query nodes is a stateless machine. It doesn't have any data on it. You can lose any of those nodes, nothing happens. And the client on top, and maybe this is the time to move to the next slide, jump one slide forward. The client on top can send a query to each of those nodes. So if you lose one of those nodes, nothing happens, you can send the query to another one.
So it kind of provides the load balancing.
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly.
Short, why don't you do that?
Okay, so yeah, we're running a bit out of time. So
20 minutes.
okay, so let's discuss a little bit the architecture. Some of the things I think I already answered in the questions, but I'll go over it again. So the first concept is we index everything. And why we index everything? Because we can. We can do that. This is part of the technology of Jet2 Data. The storage concept is columnar store. As I said in the beginning, the idea was to take indexing concept from the domain of search engine and combine it, integrate it with the modern database architecture, which is columnar. So we keep the columnar copy and the indexes per column. And one important thing is that we do that all the data that we keep is kept in a model which is append only. Now, as most of you probably know, when you write data to HDFS, you can only write a block or you can append to block. You cannot modify block, you cannot update block. And this makes a lot of sense because updating files is a very expensive operation. You want to do that in a big data environment, it's very, very difficult. And actually, when I started designing Jet2 Data, I came with the concept of append-only indexes and append-only columns separated from HDFS. And obviously, it works the same thing in HDFS, so the combination makes perfect sense. But I think it's the only way to handle files in big data. You need to append. The difficult thing is to create append-only indexes, and I will explain shortly how we do that. And as I said before, all the data is stored in HDFS. We use all the HDFS goodies, the high availability, the replication. We rely on that. We didn't invent a new storage system. We use existing storage system. And also, we don't depend only on HDFS. Actually, Jet2 Data can work also in different distributed file systems like S3 or POSIX. And we haven't released it yet, but we are going to have a version for S3 as well for Amazon Cloud. Another important thing, and this is something that I've had a lot of arguments about, is the shared everything concept. Shared everything means that we have the data node separated from, the query node separated from the data node, as opposed to share nothing and peer, in which everything is executed here. Now, shared everything in Jet2 works well, again, because we have indexes. Because this node knows in advance where we need to scan the data for, we don't need to put it here. It actually makes a lot of sense to do the execution up here when we can see the entire data set and choose exactly what we want to get. This is also very helpful for scalability because we actually separate the computing resources from the storage resources. One of the problems you will see in Hadoop clusters is that you have all those data nodes and they have storage on them, and then you want to install, let's say you want to install Impala on them. Impala takes a lot of memory because the execution of each node is very, very fast in terms of memory. So you need to upgrade all your servers, all your machine, and you add CPU power and memory to them in order to handle those new execution engines that run on top of them. On the contrary, with Jet2 Data, the computation done in separate nodes. So if I need a faster queries, I need to scale only here. Those data nodes can stay commodity dumb storage nodes. And I don't know if you remember, but 2 years ago when we were speaking about Hadoop, the term commodity hardware was very common. Everybody would say, this is commodity hardware, it's cheaper. Nobody's saying commodity hardware on Hadoop anymore, because when you put all those execution engine on top of it, it's not commodity anymore. You need to put very powerful server. But with this architecture, this again becomes commodity. If you need more storage, just scale your storage. If you need more processing because you have more concurrent queries, just add them here. If you have less concurrent queries, you just throw those nodes away. So it's very simple, very elastic. And this architecture, the shared everything architecture, also minimize inter-node operations. Because again, when you have a complete view on the data from those nodes, and you choose exactly what you want to take with them, many times you finish the query with very small number of nodes, maybe even one. In many cases, maybe even one. And one more or less important detail is that the way we implemented our execution engine, again, because we assume that a lot of the work we've done in a small number of nodes, is that we implemented a multi-threaded execution engine. And this may sound very simple, but it took us a lot of time to do it. It's a very, very complicated thing to do. Most execution engines that you are familiar with are not multi-threaded. They are single process or multi-process, but they use only one thread most of the way. we use many threads, and we actually can utilize all the calls that are in this query node, which means that the queries, the evaluation part, runs very fast and can scale according to the number of calls. Questions here? Let's start with them because you are getting all the good questions.
If your result set turns out to be large, how do you need to scale your compute nodes, or how does it work?
So the question is, if the result set is large, do we need to scale the compute node? And the answer is yes. You need to use JETRO data for the correct use cases. But obviously not always you can control exactly what's going to happen. So in order to handle a large result set, you need to have more compute nodes. That's true.
Do you have anything left for that to automatically figure out how many you need to spawn?
At this point, no, but this is something that we are dealing with. Any more?
Okay. Yes, I understand. When you build the whole thing, for example, in order to execute that query, whatever, when data is in Hadoop, therefore, first it is necessary to move data and build columnar storage. Second, or maybe not second, sequentially, but in parallel, I mean, you have just another process to be done. You have to build all indices on the top of that, and after that you start executing, and you access specific nodes based on those indices. Now, therefore, it always about Hadoop was said that you don't need to move data, it is stored there. To be honest, I can say I like it, it's like dump there, like whatever. Data lake, I would say data swamp rather than lake. But anyway, in your case, you move data, and really another architecture to some degree similar, but what does not use big data completely. You have big data, Hadoop, whatever. You have data warehouse with regular traditional database, relational, Oracle, whatever. And you, for querying, you move, you know approximately what kind of queries, you move data from Hadoop to this. And essentially, in that sense, it is similar. The only difference is between Oracle, that you still keep in that big data environment for your data. But tell more about differences, please.
So you are comparing this to an architecture in which you have your data in Hadoop, and then you can take it out to external analytic database and do your faster analytics there. So you can, yes, in some sense you can say this is similar, but only in some sense.
Yes.
I think it's very important that we see it where we go. Very important for companies, enterprises that go to Hadoop to keep their data in the Hadoop platform. The idea of having one cluster of Hadoop and then having another analytic database, and then you have a complicated process that needs to take the data from Hadoop to this database, and the integration cannot be easy. And then your user can only send their queries on a limited amount of aggregate data that you send out, because the external database can sometimes be limited in storage, for example. In Hadoop, you don't have problem of storage. This is very difficult. This is very expensive and difficult, and nobody likes that. And we've seen those architectures in the past 2 or 3 years ago. Everybody's trying to run away from that. So what we are doing is we are bringing the power of analytic database to the ecosystem of Hadoop. The data still stays on HDFS. You have the scalability and power of the storage system, but you also have the analytic capabilities based on indexes.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
If your data is flowing into Hadoop continuously, how do you hook it up to the index?
So it's the same question.
Yeah, it's similar, right?
Yeah. So
What's
again,
involved, basically?
as it works today, we provide a loading process. The loading process gets as an input your file and the description of the data, and it is the responsibility of the application to push the data inside. Usually, again, this is what we've seen the customers we have so far, is that they have pretty good control on how the data is going in and how to push it in. They know that they put each day in a separate folder or something like that. So we found out that it's smarter to let the application to handle it, because they know exactly how the data comes and what happens there.
Can you also maybe refer to the JETRO side of it, so you get delta data. How do you deal with that?
Okay. So one of the important things in JETRO data and the indexes mechanism is that we are able to add information to the indexes in a very smooth way. So the process is that you take your initial data. Usually when we start the process with the customer, they will have, I don't know, several tens of terabytes of data, several billions of records. They will do one big load. It will take a while. More or less, just to give you the numbers. So the numbers are around 1 billion rows per hour. This is the rate of loading. And then the new data of maybe the daily or the hourly data will comes in, and it's loaded when it comes. Since the loading process is very quick, it usually doesn't, that we don't have a problem keeping up the pace. And I'm not familiar with many companies that create more than 1 billion records per hour. And if they do that, we also have some solutions for that. So you keep on pushing the data inside, and while you're pushing the data, you can still, that doesn't prevent you from querying the existing data. There is no blocking operation here. The data comes in, you still do the queries on the data that's already there. There is no disturbance.
Yes, please. How this one interacts with the resource management, beyond resource management, or does it interact, or it stays away from the resource?
So you are jumping to the roadmap slide, and we will show that we are going to integrate with Yarn. Not yet, but we will be there soon. So let me jump forward because we don't have a lot of time. I want a few more things to say. So just a few words about how our indexes looks like. They don't look like that, but just to understand. So the indexes are an inverted list. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this concept, with this term. It comes from the domain of search engine. It's actually a list of raw IDs related to each value, and they are stored as hierarchical compressed bitmaps. And we have some patterns about how we store them and how we access the values in O1 time. Hierarchical bitmaps are very good for O and not operations. They are very efficient. The problem usually with bitmaps is what happens when you have a very sparse bitmap. So one of the things in this technology is that we can handle sparse bitmaps very well. So if you have a value that have raw ID number 1, and the next raw ID that you have there is number 10 billion, we are not going to take 10 billion bytes to store it. We are going to take maybe 10 bytes to store it. And the secret is in the way we handle those bitmaps. We discussed load performance before. So load is very fast. We are using append-only model. We are only appending information. We creating new blocks of indexes. And we have a background process that does some kind of background optimization and merge. In case we have duplicated entries, we just create a new block of indexes instead of the original blocks that have duplicated into entries. All this is done in the background and it's transparent, and there is no need to wait for it in order to start querying. And as I mentioned before, all this is compatible with HDFS. All those files, all the data model sits on HDFS. Nothing resides on the query node. The query node can be started or stopped. We rely on HDFS, high availability and replication. So the storage is safe because you're using HDFS.
Can you please explain what's hierarchical in this data model?
Well, I will try the short explanation because the long one I can speak about it for 5 hours and people need to go home. So the hierarchical here has two meanings. First of all, we have a hierarchical in the way that we access the values in the index. One of the problems with indexes and standard B2 indexes, as I mentioned before, is that you need to hold all the indexes in memory, and this is a lot of memory for if we have a lot of indexes. We have different levels of the index. The first level is very small and very dense, and it's helped us to find the location of a specific value. You are looking for the value, I don't know, X. You go with X to this level. When with very sophisticated encoding, in O1 operation, we will let you know, we will know exactly where the actual index sits on the disk physically. So this is the first level. And this first level is very dense, so we can hold it in memory. With this information, we have another level that tells us with this position, there's a reference level that is sent us to a physical location. And then finally, we get to the bitmap. Now, the bitmap itself also has several levels in it. So we use the levels to compress. Each level holds information about the lower level and tell us whether the bits are on or off. And the off values, we don't need to hold information because the higher level actually do the compression. And if you really want to know the full explanation, the patent is published, so you can read it. It's 40 pages. It took me months to write it, and I'm not sure I understand what's written there, but there are some. You write technical things to patent lawyers, and after you read it, you don't know what's written there. But there are some diagrams there, so they explain, at least seeing the diagrams, you can get the concept of hierarchy. Maybe I should do a separate meetup just on that, because it's a very long story.
Is there a link to that in the website or something?
Not sure there is a link, but just write my name with the word patent and you will. I'm not sure you will last more than 2 pages, really. But maybe I will try to do something shorter to explain it better. Okay, so I'm almost running out of time. And so I'll stop the question now, sorry, and I'll run forward because I also want to show you the demo. So just a few tricks we used in Jethro data. So code is written in C++. If you want to get performance, I'm sorry all the Java lovers, but you need C++ to get good performance. You need to control the memory, you need to control your pointers, you need to control the threads. Column store, and this is true column store, that means that everything is processed as a column, including the concept of vectorization of expression. And this is interesting because I've been hearing a lot of people speaking and amazed by the concept. It was discovered that yes, it's not so smart to evaluate each expression separately. You need to use it in a separate function. You need to do to handle vectors, and everybody thinks it's an amazing thing, but actually it's very common and basic programming technique, which is bringing you to 10 times faster. Like I mentioned before, multi-threaded execution, very difficult thing to do. We are using a lot of information from the indexes. This is another advantages that we have an index-based SQL engine. We know a lot about the tables and about the data before we even start. So if a regular planner needs to start checking for statistics to know, for example, which table is larger and which is smaller when it's trying to do the join, we already know that before the query started because we have indexes for everything. Not only that, also if we have a where clause inside the query and the large join table becomes smaller suddenly, we also know that dynamically throughout the plan because we're doing the where as a first stage of the query. So there's a lot of advantages using index as metadata, and you can do a lot of smart planning when you have that. And sometimes we do queries that access indexes only. Sometimes we don't even need to access the data in columns because the indexes have all the information. So this is really quick. Do a lot of smart caching on the server, both on the local file system and in memory. So a lot of time we can save the round trips to the Hadoop cluster and reduce the use of Hadoop resources. A few words about use case. So I mentioned before, and I think your question also relates to that. We are doing very good in use case where we need to find smaller parts of the data. If you need to do full scan, if you want to run a report that scan all the data sets, use Hive or Impala. It's not contradicting. You can put Jethro and Hive or Impala. You don't need to choose which one you're using. But if you want to do queries that fetch, they do a lot of filtering and fetch smaller amount of data, in this use case of like dashboard, interactive SQL, BI tools, Jethro data will work much better for it than anything else. So let's speak a little bit about benchmark. One word of warning, benchmarks are always a cheat. I think you all know that. I've never seen a vendor publishing a benchmark in which his product was not the fastest. So everybody cheat. I don't know how many of you heard there was a session about it in Strata by Greg, right? Ryan, you explained it very well. So everybody cheat except us, of course. What we did, in order to show that we're not cheating, is we took a benchmark that Impala did, that was 4 months ago, and they published a benchmark based on PPCDS. PPCDS is the standard benchmark that everybody uses in big data domain. and they compared Impala, this is Impala obviously, to other products like Shark and Presto and all the rest. And there is a group of queries that they call them, CDS actually call them interactive queries, because they bring relatively small amount of the data. So this is what Impala did, and we did the same benchmark at the same time on a scale of 1,000, it's 1 terabyte. The cluster was relatively small, 5 nodes cluster, 1 query node, very moderate. This is the ratio. So this is Impala, this is Jetro. Approximately 5 to 10 times faster. This is what we had 4 months ago. And since then, Impala did some work, and of course they improved their tool, improved their performance. But so did we. So they released another benchmark this October for Strata, and we did the same thing. And this time we are between 10 to 20 times faster. Those are the results for interactive queries. We didn't invent those queries. There was some, I will be nice and I will not say cheats in Impala benchmarks. But anyway, those are the results. And again, this is for interactive queries. The queries that you want to see when you do if you have a BI2, for example.
Sorry, our numbers are in what measure?
I'm sorry?
What is the measure of numbers?
Seconds. Seconds.
Seconds.
Yes, seconds.
So 4 seconds for quickest query.
Yes, again, those are not queries that we chose especially for us. We didn't build those queries. I can create a query in Jetro that will return 100 milliseconds. Some queries are going only to the indexes and it return in less than a second. But we took a standard benchmark, not something that we invented, so it can be fair, not a complete chip. But yes, this is the number that you can expect. And I want to do, because we have very little time, I want to jump to a demo. So assuming I have network, and I'm going to do it very short because we don't have a lot of time. What you see here is Tableau. Okay, Tableau GUI connected to Jetro. Jetro Data has a TPCDS database. It has 3 billion rows, 1 query node, and 5 very moderate storage nodes. So not a lot of hardware behind this. And when I click something here, hopefully I have network, so if not, you will forgive me. Let's say I take out some of the filters, or change some of the filters, because I want to see something more specific. Okay, so right now I sent a query over 3 billion rows and it returned in less than 5 seconds. And when you're talking about interactive BI means that somebody sits in front of this and he wants to see the results. He wants to go and do this, and this to his filter, and he doesn't want to go to a coffee break now and return after half an hour. So the numbers we're seeing here is between 5 to 10 seconds on this very moderate hardware connected to a Tableau using standard ADPC, JDBC that we provide. And this is something, just playing it when I'm speaking, adding filters, changing the filters. This is something you cannot achieve by any other SQL on Hadoop solution, because any other SQL on Hadoop solution will go and fully scan the data. And here you get it back in a few seconds. So I'm sorry I have to do it very short, because we don't have a lot of time. Just really few words about integration. So, I think we mentioned it before. So as I said, Jetro can sit side by side next to other solutions. Jetro is not a solution for all the use cases. If you need to do long reporting, if you need to do ETL, Jetro is not a solution. True, we are going to do to add in the future a lot of capabilities, so we'll be able to scan faster, larger data sets. But still, we think that we sit side by side with other solutions. So your data comes in, it sits in Hadoop. First, you need to choose what you want to put in Jetro. Probably not all of the data is relevant for interactive BI. Maybe some of it needs cleansing, there is an ETL process, but the relevant data you will send to JETRO indexer. JETRO indexer will process the data and write it back to HDFS. Those green squares here. And then you have your query node, could be the same node, that gets the SQL queries from your BI tools, and they will access only the relevant data from JETRO. In parallel, MapReduce can still run. And the fact that JETRO uses indexes and do a lot of smart caching means that the amount of resources used by JETRO to do those queries will be very small. So it does not disturb other processes from running. Hadoop is a platform today. It's not just a single-use tool. And this platform usually have a lot of things running in it. We don't want to disturb them. We just want to work side by side with them. And as mentioned before, the amount of storage is more or less 70%. So, without getting deeply into this process, we have just released an open beta version just 2 weeks ago. It's available on our website, and you're all welcome to register and download it. We don't charge for it. Installation is very, very simple. Because the installation is done on a separate node, you don't need to install something on your production cluster. You don't need to say, I'm putting a risky software here. It's a separate server. You just need to give us a little bit of storage space in HDFS. RPM installation, starting the service, creating an instance with a single command, start your JETRO client, and you're in business. And of course, running the loader, pointing to your data, you need to create a description, a schema for your data, and you're on. Very, very simple. We have, surprisingly, even to us, we have several customers that downloaded the product, and actually, before we even managed to speak with them, they were only loading data, just asking us how to book ODBC or JDBC. So it's a very simple process. Almost done. So a few words about roadmap. I've mentioned JETRO for S3. This is a product that we are working on. The technology can work on any kind of distributed file system, of course, without modification, but we are going to be releasing that soon. Just a quick question. How many of you are working on AWS Cloud and think it's going to be interesting for them? 1, 2, 3, 4. That's a lot, and 5. That's a lot of people in this cloud. So we'll do that. We'll do it for you. That's going to save a lot of cost and a lot of time, because all AWS analytics solution based on the concept of let's put the data in S3, then pull all of it out to Elastic MapReduce cluster, do the processing there, write the data back to S3. You want to process it again, you go again, take all the data, do the processing, put up a lot of nodes, are very expensive nodes. In JETRO, you do the loading process once, write it back to S3, and then you can start a query server anytime you want, do your query on the data, stop it, start it again to query on the same data without pulling the data again and again. So less query nodes, less time for pulling the data. Amount of time, so we're going to have analytic functions. PDF, you can see the list. Light text search, functional indexes. That's something I can also talk about for hours, but we don't have time for that. Pushing me, distributed query, integration with Yarn. This is something important. We are going to support Parquet and Orc formats. And they're going to call me from here, so.
I want to give a great big round of applause. Thank you, Boaz Ravsky, CTO of JETRO Data. We are out of time for Q&A, but Boaz will be here for one-on-one questions. So on the honor system, whoever didn't get a shirt, just throw your hands up. And quickly. Can't see hands, sorry, there's like a blinding light over my head.
Just throw them away.
Just throw them away?
Yes, difficult question, don't give.
Yeah. All right. Thank you all for coming. Boaz is here for one-on-one questions. Thank you.
Thank you.